All right, welcome to another episode of Real to Real.
Yes, sir.
And we are reviewing, I don't use the word classic, but we are reviewing the movie Kids. And if you do not know about this movie, do not let the title fool you.
Right.
This is not a
So
kids movie.
so very heavy hitting stuff.
Absolutely. So, a little background information. Came out in 1995 as a directorial debut of Larry Clark. The film also debuts Rosario Dawson, who's been in many projects. She plays the character Ruby, Leo Fitzpatrick, who plays the protagonist Telly, Justin Pierce, who plays Casper. Justin Pierce also was on next Friday, actually,
Yeah.
played Roach, and Chloe Sevigny, who plays Jenny. So, I'm gonna let you, in your own way, describe what this movie is about before I provide more context to
Well,
it.
honestly, like it's basically about I won't say they're slackers, but just like two, I guess you could say young adults, and their excessive need of having sex with women, more
Hmm.
so and preferably virgins, because they feel as though that like virgins are pretty much the essence of having sex.
That's a
if
good way of
you
saying it.
if you want to say that, like it's basically like, of course, having sex in general is just, what I'm saying, a good way of, having that bond between a male and a female. But in their mind, is a virgin is pretty much like it's that first thing, like you're her first, so like nobody can ever take that away from you, is saying that, what I'm saying, you had sex with her first, so you basically took her precious fruit, as we want to, what I'm saying, refer to it. So basically the protagonist Telly and his friend Casper are basically on the hunt of having sex. And it started out with, Telly having sex, or trying to egg a young woman into having sex, and he pretty much does it. And Casper's just outside waiting for him to finish,
Right.
and then they just go on the whole escapade of, the whole young adult, young male mindset of, talking about females and having sex, and
Unfiltered
that.
dialogue.
Yeah. Very, very, very raw 1990s version of, language between two horny males.
Right. And to piggyback off that, like what Dee mentioned, the movie is shot in like a quasi documentary style, which I think plays to the strength of the movie
Yeah.
because it's like all this happens in one day. The whole story plot. This all happens in one day. And it's literally following the life of like the urban youth at that time
Right.
in New York City, whether it's skateboarders, just having sex, doing drugs, drinking.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where when you have a topic like this, you have to be careful not to romanticize certain issues.
Right.
It's all about relatability. I think this movie is relatable to many youth at that time, but I don't think it romanticized anything.
Nah.
So it could definitely be an uncomfortable watch,
Yeah.
depending on your background or what you thought the movie was going to be about
Right.
when you watched it.
Like
Um,
I liked how like it was that unfiltered, like the whole discussion, because I know like when they pretty much fast forward and they went to like the homeboy house, then you have that whole, male female version of, their interpretation of sex, and the other gender's interpretation of sex, like,
yeah,
and they just have that whole discussion about, oh well, I did this, or I want to do this, or I'm trying to, talk to this person so I can go ahead and take her, what I'm saying, her virginity, or vice versa. In the females aspect was like, I had sex with this dude, and like I did this, and we had sexual intercourse with this, or we had oral sex with this, and we did it here, we did it there, and it's like, yeah, it,
it,
it pulls no punches when you talk about the whole sex aspect of it all.
and the way it was screen written, like you would think there was no script. Like it said, it felt so natural.
Yeah, like they
Like
was
if
just having a everyday conversation like with each other about sex in general.
Right. And it's like another thing too, which clearly was like the underlying theme of the movie was HIV and AIDS.
Yeah, yeah,
And one of the potent conversations that you mentioned was one of the characters, I think when they went to like their homeboy spot and it was like, yo, I think it's I think I even jotted down. Yeah, they were saying that HIV AIDS, like it was made up because they didn't know anyone who died from it.
right. They thought it was just something that's going, happen in some fictitious world or something like that. Like it
And
wasn't relevant to them.
that makes sense for them to think that because okay, this is 95. Clearly HIV and AIDS was already prevalent. But when you think about the youth in that sense, if it doesn't affect them, and we probably have our own things that we probably consider in that light. It might not have been STDs, but it could have been something else where it's like, well, I don't see it affecting us,
Right,
so it can't be real. Like
right,
we saw that happen recently with even the pandemic. Remember, there was like COVID challenges for
right.
because it's like, that can't be real. So they was trying to see if someone was going to get it,
Hmm.
and I think that was like, yo, this is like very telling because I can see people relating to this. It's
Right,
like it's lawlessness. Like no one died from that. Like let's just keep doing what we're doing.
right,
Um, I want to mention a quote from the director Larry Clark. He said, "I wanted to present the way kids see things, but without all this baggage, this morality that these old middle-aged Hollywood guys bring to it. Kids don't think that way. They're living in the moment, not thinking about anything beyond that, and that's what I wanted to catch."
right. And that's the thing though, like they didn't really specify the age group, but I was thinking like it was maybe like late teens, early 20s and stuff like that.
I don't think so. Too. I think there was like, see, that's right because it's like it's up to interpretation. I'm thinking
Yeah,
they're like, I can see why you said that because Telly's mentioning getting a job,
yeah,
but they look like it was like no more than 17. I know some of the girls they were dealing with, like I think the last girl Telly was with was like 13.
right.
So
Yeah, so I want it's probably I'll say middle teenage years, like the whole I guess 13 to 17,
that's fair.
because I I know it was one section where they was talking about which was kind of yeah, it was very I won't say triggering to me, but it was kind of like it's kind of going that way where he I think it was Casper was saying that he kind of liked them young or how they looked or was it Taylor? I can't remember. But one of them was saying that like they kind of like them looking young or something like that. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, man. We kind of going in a route
Yeah,
that we don't need to go, but at the same time, I can kind of see where their mindset at, what I'm saying, at that particular point in time. It's like, a young female still has, her youthfulness to it. So I can kind
sure.
of understand that, but I was like, nah, man, we're gonna have to pump the brakes on that.
But see, you're mentioning that as us being mature
Yeah,
and for what we know,
right,
right? Like that's why I think Larry Clark captured what he intended to do in that quote. It's like,
right,
nah, this is how some of these kids in these inner cities think, you
right.
know. And my mindset wasn't as a teenager because I felt like it was the opposite. We was having a real conversation. I felt like it was the opposite for like me and some people I was with. It's like, wait a minute, virgin. I don't, they might be want to fall in love and like they get that
Right.
would just, that was the opposite for me. But I said, but no one, I could see, teens thinking like that. Like, 'cause I think Telly was the one who was like, and I'm trying to repeat what he said without getting kicked off. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of
Just break
paraphrase.
us down, man.
Right. He was like, nah, man, it's not going to be, I'm trying to repeat some of these things, paraphrase it. Basically, he said that it's kind of like what you mentioned. It's the ideal way because it's new. It's like you're the first one in it
Right.
and it's unforgettable. No matter what happens, you're the one that took it away.
Right.
And this is when it's like, it felt uncomfortable because we don't move in a society where certain things aren't mentioned in that same
Hmm.
rawness. But it's like, yo, this is a PSA for not only guys, but definitely young women. It's like you can't just because Telly is saying the same lines to each girl he's
Yeah.
mentioning.
Yeah. It's like it's pretty much his setup to, what I'm saying, take they virginity. It's like, I'm not gonna treat you bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want it, and it's gonna be okay. I won't hurt you and stuff like that. Stuff that pretty much make them at ease to say, okay, well, I trust you. But then
Mhm.
after he already takes it, it's like, okay, well, I'm on to the next one. Like, she's not more of a factor anymore. Like, I got another notch up under my belt, so I'm going ahead and go to the new one that I see that is a virgin that I want to go ahead and take. So it's like he's just piling up all these bodies, and it's like, they're not okay with it, but at the same time, it's like they're okay with it. It's like you don't have that whole situation where they're trying to, like, okay, well, you hurt me, so I'm gonna go ahead and take my revenge. But in Jenny's aspect, like, her and Ruby went to the clinic,
Mhm.
and they of course got, tested, just because, like, they just wanted to see what their status was. And it's funny because, like, Ruby was the one that was the more
That was
more
active.
open one.
There you
Yeah, more open as
go.
to, having intercourse with people, and she skated by with nothing. Like, but Jenny's, on the other hand, her first time ended up being that she contracted HIV from Telly.
And the only time.
Yes.
And that's
So,
important. I'm glad you brought that out. Not to
right.
interrupt, but that's important because that does happen in real life. You
Yeah.
can't judge because all it takes is one time to get something. That's all it takes. That's
Right.
something that is a teachable moment to. I feel like even some adults, because some of them still
Yeah.
don't get it. But
Yeah.
but all it takes is one time because when you set it up that way, they go into the clinic. I can see some people like, well, we know who gonna get one. We know Ruby is definitely gonna get
Right.
something
You
because
just
he was
automatically
bragging
think,
about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, I had anal sex, I had unprotected sex with a couple of guys, like, had like 8 or 9 guys, but half of them was unprotected, and then I did another two that was, anal sex. So she was basically very adventurous in her sexuality and her, I guess you could say promiscuity, or however you want to say it. Like,
right.
when it comes to, having sex. So for her to just skate by, and not having nothing, and then all of a sudden Jenny, her very first time that she had sex, and lost her virginity, she gets contracted with the HIV virus. So it was like, man, so she's basically in shock and all that, like, how it happened to me, like, I have to tell somebody, I have to call my mom, and tell her that, I
Mhm.
have this virus that, I only had sex once, and I have
That
to not only tell her, but also I have to, have a conversation with the guy that, I had sex with, and let him know that, like, hey, you gave me HIV. So it was pretty much like the middle part of the movie that she was, after she found out, she went ahead and went on this whole little expedition of trying to find, or I guess you could say, follow and tell him that she had HIV.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's just a little side note. It shows you the how life was without a cell phone. Like she literally had to like trace his steps the best way she could. And oh man, it's like you're knowing this now at the beginning of the movie, and then you see Telly is still because we're assuming he doesn't get tested, so
Yeah,
he's unknowingly, and who knows? That's the part that is not doing too much. If he does know, will he stop his behavior?
that's
We're
the
not,
thing.
we're not sure, um, because there's nothing redeemable about Telly throughout this movie. There's
Nah,
nothing to say I want to be like this guy. Um, but I thought it was an interesting irony. I don't know if you caught this layer as well, D. Like Casper, who of course that's his running mate,
mm-hmm.
but he had moments of like where he seemed a little bit more tolerable than Telly, like how he
Yeah,
offers the peach, they stole it, offered a peach to the little
right.
girl on the side, and he actually gave money to a disabled man in the
Yeah,
subway. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? He's probably just following the crowd. And even
right.
with the fight where they beat down that dude in
Yeah,
that park,
that was crazy.
yeah, initially he didn't want to really. He's like, "Yo, forget about it." But dude talk trash. He clearly didn't
Yeah,
know he ran that deep. He
right,
clearly did not know he ran
right.
that deep. They nearly killed him. But it's Casper. I don't want. I guess not jump too far ahead.
Hmm.
Casper actually is the one that does the most apprehensible act at the end of the movie.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I don't know if you caught that irony throughout. I was like, yo, that's the ironic part
Yeah,
because
it was a setup. Yeah, that's basically what it was.
yeah, because even with Casper, not saying he's a saint. There's no saints in this movie, but even with Casper, right? It's like I'm not Casper, but Telly. We never seen him try to rape anyone or take it by force. I don't know if he actually can use that word. Um, to take it by force, but
Yes.
everything in him is manipulation. Not saying that's
Yeah.
right either, but Jenny has no. She's fairly unconscious at the end of this movie. I'm sorry, I'm jumping too much ahead, but let's talk about some of the critical aspects from your point of view. Like in terms of the movie, what did you think about the characters, the plot? Like as someone who critiquing it, like, do you feel like it ages well? Did you like the acting in the movie?
Well, the thing about it is like, um, I guess you want to call it. Is it a timepiece? Because it's set in the '90s where pretty much everything was still pretty much raw.
Yeah,
But as far as like it having like replayability and like standing up to today, like yes, like you can see that like you can pretty much like do a pros and cons of how today's, I guess you want to call it youths are compared to, yesterday's, and you can kind of pretty much see the correlation with, stick six is still more than prominent. Of
mm,
course, you have young kids still having unprotected sex and not knowing their status. But at the same time, today we have more knowledge about HIV and AIDS and all these
right,
STDs and STIs. So that way, if you have an issue, you can always read up about it because pretty much now technology is more advanced now. So that way you can go ahead and look it up online or, on your phone or anything like that, as opposed to back in the day, like you pretty much didn't know until you had to actually go and get tested. And still to this day, you still have to get tested regardless whether or not you kind of you don't know if you're unsure or you kind of know you got something. It's still best to go get tested. But at that particular point in time in the early '90s and mid '90s, it was still new. Like pretty much HIV and AIDS was still new. Like it was pretty much that old mythological disease that nobody didn't want to, what I'm saying, get contracted because they all automatically assumed that. And then pretty much it was the whole aspect of it that if you contract it, then, more often than not, you will have it turn into AIDS and then you will ultimately die from it. But
right.
as opposed to now, you have like modern medicine and, advanced medicine to the point where you will still have it, but it's a lot easier to manage as opposed to back in the day. So this movie is still something that can teach like young adults that like, hey, like, be mindful of who you have sex with. And if you do have sex with it, it's always make sure that you have either protected sex or just if you don't feel like you want to have sex, just remain abstinent. And
Yeah,
that way you won't have to worry about
that's what they tell
yeah,
you when you get
yeah,
tested.
yeah.
The safest way is those that they're always going to tell you that.
Right. So that way you don't have to worry about, what I'm saying, making that necessary call to your parents or, telling that person that you had sex with that, hey, that, you gave me something or I gave you something and what are we gonna do? And then ultimately, of course, as well, having a child in that whole process, so it's always good to know your standing as far as like STDs and stuff like that, but also like this is also a teachable movie to where it shows you you know, um the raw aspect of what teenagers go through on a daily, what I'm saying, basis when it comes to like talking with their peers about, the whole sex part of it.
Right, I agree. And also, now that I think about it, I think stigma still were strong in
Yeah.
regards to HIV. 'Cause I remember at one point it was like, unless you were a homosexual, you couldn't contract HIV/AIDS. I remember
Right.
I was actually reading about it that was a thing. 'Cause I remember
Right.
when even Magic Johnson got diagnosed with it, which I think was like 1990. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I know there were rumors about his sexuality because of the stigma of
Yeah.
HIV/AIDS. Um, So I think you made a definitely an important point because I could see this being. I don't know how classes are formed now with like what they watch, but I could see like a certain classes like that classic traditional. Here's the sheet. Make sure your parents sign this so we can watch this
Yeah.
movie. Like I could see that being like a teacher, like okay, a sex ed class. We're
Yes, a
showing this
sex ed
movie.
class. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Have to
because the
sign a
movie.
waiver
Yeah, because
or
anything.
permission slip, I should say.
Yeah, because I think the movie when I researched it was like rated. I don't think it had a rating when it was released. Like that's how because they know it was going to take it there.
Yeah,
Um, and let me see. I also want to read Robert Ebert, who was a prominent reviewer. I was curious what he thought with the movie, and he mentioned that in regards to Telly, because he I think he gave it like three out of five,
that's not that.
maybe
It's
three
not
and a
that
half out of
bad.
five.
It's average.
Yeah, so he was like, in regards to Telly, his life is a kind of hell, briefly interrupted by orgasms. And I was like, that's a good, that's a good way to put it because when you look at their lifestyle, right? Like you briefly see Telly and his mother and his younger brother, and clearly I don't want to say there's nothing promising, but it's like you can see it's nothing for him to care about. You
Right.
know, it's like all we do is hang out in the streets because when I come back home, I have a mother who is breastfeeding in the middle, which Casper that was very attractive. Apparently, that shows you just like the mindset
Yeah.
of look, it's just sex. That's
It was
all
just
we
all
care
about
about.
sex. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like one of the. Well, let's get to it, and I'll talk about this quote that kind of makes it full circle. Um, so to your credit, like now Jenny, that becomes the story arc. So even though Telly and Casper is going through and introducing all these different characters, different ages, Jenny is now on this expedition, as you mentioned, to see if to confront Casper. We're assuming either to warn
Tell
him
you.
or confront him. Either way, Telly, excuse me, Telly to confront Jenny. I mean, Jenny to confront Telly. I said it wrong again.
It's all
From
good. We rolling with it. Jenny's
right,
confronting Telly about, what I'm saying, her contracting HIV. Yeah.
there you go, there you go. Damn, Telly messed me up. So she goes and she finds her way to this nightclub because she assumes or she was led that he was going to be there. Gets drugged
Yeah. Yeah.
at the club, and well, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but trivia. The guy who gave her the drugs, like with his Coke bottle glasses, he's actually the screenwriter of the movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and
Did
I
not
believe
know that.
yeah, and he actually it seemed like I don't know what age he was when the movie came out, but it's believed that he wrote this movie at age 18.
That's some talent right there.
Yeah, which makes sense why all the dialogue was so relatable and felt natural because like I'm of age, I know how we talk,
Right.
people around me talk. And he actually went on to screenwrite, I think this movie called Gummo. I heard that's a cult classic, but I've never seen it.
I
Um,
don't know about. I seen it. What's it called again?
I think it's called Gummo, Gummo, or Gumno or Gummo, but it seemed to be pretty controversial as well. For what I quickly read up on it, maybe that'll be a next movie we can look
Yeah,
at.
that's what I was about to say. Maybe we have to take a look at that and see how it is.
Yeah, because the actress that plays Jenny also is in that movie. So now we've seen her trying to discover she gets drugged. She does end up at least approaching the party to where
Yeah,
Casper and Telly is at. Uh, at this point, everybody's effed up. I mean, I'm talking about drugged out, liquored out, high.
everything.
It's like a huge orgy looking. Like everybody just
Right. And what's crazy to add a little small caveat is they even had like the younger kids like partaking in it. And it's like, yo, like that is crazy. Like you have like these young little, I would say like maybe like 9, 10, 11, smoking weed and them smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. And it's like, yo, like, yo, you
like,
weren't nowhere.
where's the supervision? Like,
Right.
but I think that is wrong. I'm not trying to. I'm just going to base it off the setting. The setting is New York, right? I have some experience. I have family in New York, and from my understanding, it can be like that because some of the parents they working all day, and you have
Yeah.
this huge city, so it's like Some of them probably had an idea, but some of them was like, well, I can't stop them. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm at work.
Right.
So it's like that's crazy to think your 10-year-old is in the same environment. They just smoking, drinking like it's nothing. And soon as they spend the night though, I'm like, yo, they
Yeah.
spent the night.
Right.
But again, to the audience, like this is 95. Like we're old enough to remember cell phones was not as prevalent. Some people had them, but it wasn't like how it is now where 98% of households had a cell phone.
Right.
So it's like when your parents they come back at a certain time, they meant it because they have to look for you. They can't
Right.
just call you.
Well, I would say this: the closest thing they had to a cell phone was the beeper and the pager. So basically, if your parents or whoever sent that page, you had to call them. So I
But what?
kind of seen
How many kids had that at that age though?
you right. But there was that one black guy, I forgot his name. I saw he had a pager up on him,
Was it
but
Harold?
I think it was the guy that was had the skateboard,
Yeah.
and he was the one that was kind of basically like as the movie, as the movie progressed, like when they ditched and went swimming, kind of was forcing himself onto the girls about, hey, let me get a
Yeah, he
kiss,
was.
let me get a
Yeah, he
kiss.
was the one that took his pass off, started doing that whole. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was very uncomfortable. I was like, all right, that's enough. Anyway, like that's
the
enough,
will
bro.
the willy wiggle. That's what he
Yeah, I
was
was like,
doing.
all right, bro, you already did it like once, like,
Right.
and then we can hear the noise, like, yo, like, what?
Right. Like, come on, man.
Like, that's enough. It's enough, Harold. We get it. But now,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a part to add to it. Um, so Jenny gets there, and of course, Casper he's not aware of what Jenny is wanting to tell Tilly. He just thinking like, yo, you're what you on him for? You know what I'm saying? Like he
Right.
already got somebody, and he's with her now.
Right.
And I think there's a part where she actually does open the door and sees him, indulging
Yeah.
in this 13-year-old. And of course, like I said, she's drugged, so she's barely making it conscious.
Yeah. She's basically just like dragging along until after that she just closes the door and just passes out
Passes
on the
out.
couch.
And then there comes Casper, the one who seemed like he had an ounce of redeemable quality, and he proceeds to rape this girl unconscious, or I'll say similar. I think there's moments where she's kind of conscious, but she's out
Yeah.
of it.
It's like she briefly wakes up but then blacks back out again.
Right. And then the movie ends with that, with showing Telly sleeping with, and narrating. And he says, like, I actually captured what he mentioned, which I thought was a good outlier to the movie. He says, when you're young, not much matters. When you find something that you care about, then that's all you got. And I was like, that's what the movie is about.
Yeah.
This is what these youth care about. And
And to
then, go
and
ahead.
to add on to that, not to mean to cut you off, but he also stated that his his thing that he cared about was having sex.
Right,
And if he didn't have sex, he basically amounted to nothing. So you kind of see where his mindset at was, at that particular point in time. It's like, oh well, I need to have sex. That is what drives me.
right,
And if I don't have this, then what good am I? Like, how am I supposed to live if I don't have this, what I'm saying, fueling what drives me? So you
right,
can kind of see that, like, that narrow mindset with, oh, I have to have sex. I have to have sex. Like, I'm going to be something if I have sex. But if I don't have sex, then what's the whole point of me just caring about life? Because I have nothing back at the house, sort of say. And then as far as like me being something with myself, as far as getting a job, I haven't gotten a job yet. So it was like, well, I got this right now, which is six. So
yeah. And that yet is very because he ain't like he tried. So I don't know where
nah,
the yet is coming. Like he kept lying to his mom, like y'all out there looking for a job,
that's all it
and
was.
you know. But nevertheless, man, I feel like this movie, especially when you look at it in today's lens, which we both did because I just got wind of this movie like maybe a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was out of chance. Like I want to say there's a YouTube channel I watched. They just randomly review movies, and I just saw this movie pop up in my like timeline, like someone reviewing it or talking about it at least. And I'm like, there's a movie called Kids, and why is it controversial? Like I had no, I came with no expectations.
Right.
So when I'm watching, I was like, oh wow, this is okay. This is in your face. This is an interesting title. I remember saying that this is an interesting title. But the funny thing is, it actually did pretty well. I think it's a 2 million budget, had over 20 million in the box office. So it actually was
Oh
a
yeah.
successful movie. But I don't think it's as recognizable because if you just ask there's people around the way, a lot of people have not heard of this movie, and I
Right.
think because of the title, it's not easy to find either. You type in kids, you're not going to just find that movie. There's going to be all kind of things that pop up. You have to look at
Exactly.
kids 1995 and they get your mind blown. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So when you think about how you'll rate this movie, it seems like you're heading towards like it's a good movie, but maybe not. Do you feel like this overall is a good movie? Not just by messaging, but just period. Just as the cinematography, do you think it's a good movie? Would you rank it? Oh, this is something I would go to the movies if I was an adult in 1995, or this is a rental?
If I was back in the mid 90s and this movie came out,
Right.
and if I saw the trailer, like say like on TV or anything like that, I would have probably went to go see it because if they if they showed it how some movies they show the pretty much all the good stuff in the trailers and stuff like that. Like if it was like hard hitting in your face in the trailer, like it was in throughout the whole entire movie, like yeah, I'll go ahead and go see it, man. Like it's something I would actually like spend money to go to the movies to go see, in my opinion. Some people might just wait till saying check it out on like DVD or anything like that, but me
Right.
personally, like I will want to see like the aspect in theaters and like have that conversation afterwards with like say like my friends, or if I took my significant other to go see it, we can have that discussion and see like the pros and cons and the upbringings of how she was brought up, what I'm saying, through the lens of her being a young adult, and my lens, and we can kind of agree to disagree on certain situations on how things went.